As a consequence of the Ukraine war, Africa has found itself bearing the brunt of food shortages and increased food prices as global supply chains remain disrupted. But there is a new campaign where the West and foreign leaders are seen as extending an olive branch to the continent, especially former colonies. Some critics would argue it is a ploy to apologize for the wrongs in the past, while others say it's neo-colonialism, with an aim to counter China's influence in Africa. So, what is it that is enticing these leaders to the continent? Let's find out in this next report. 2022 has been a defining year for Africa. First, it was Russia. Its foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, visited Egypt, Ethiopia, Uganda, and the Republic of Congo. A trip that US media saw as a way to counter Western narratives which paint Russia as isolated. Russia did the opposite. One of Lavrov's objectives was to reassure African leaders that grain supply will continue.
And yes, the situation in Ukraine did additionally negatively affect the food markets, but not because of the Russian special operation. Rather due to the absolutely inadequate reaction of the West, which announced sanctions, undermining the availability of food on the markets.
Soon after Lavrov completed his African safari, the French president landed in 3 African countries of Cameroon, Benin and Guinea-Bissau, where he made this statement.
In this regard, beyond culture, creation, restitutions, the themes at the heart of our cooperation and of this visit to Benin, culture, heritage, vocational training, sports education, are the new priorities of our African policy and are priorities shared by you, Mr. President. This is why France will continue to engage alongside Benin in its efforts to reform and promote its attractiveness.
Then came this visit. The US Secretary of State's tour of Africa that created a buzz and raised some questions. Why are the Western leaders trying to outdo each other on their outreach to Africa?
What we seek most of all is a true partnership between the United States and Africa. We don't want an imbalanced or transactional relationship. And our commitment to a stronger partnership with Africa is not about trying to outdo anyone else.
However, Emmanuel Macron's second visit to the continent in less than a month raised eyebrows in the region, specifically the country that he chose to mend the ties with, Algeria. The visit came less than 2 months after Algeria marked 6 decades of independence following 132 years of French rule and a devastating 8-year war. Macron's trip wasn't as successful as it was portrayed.
Italy has apologized to Libya for its the mess they made. Belgium has done it to the Republic Democratic of Congo. Of course, Italy, as I said, Germany also has done it to Namibia. But for instance, France so far has not apologized, never excused to what happened, and especially when I speak about nuclear explosion in 1960s, they never apologize nor compensation. This is again one way or the other to neglect, to despise, to mistreat Algerian people in general.
Statues have been pulled down and national icons re-evaluated. But Europe's efforts to come to terms with its imperial past have largely stopped short of handing back the cultural treasures pillaged by the continent's colonial powers. Until now, perhaps, the returns were meant to pressure Western institutions to follow suit. More broadly, they have also brought into focus the continued legacy of colonialism in British and European institutions.
Overall population in Africa are really awakening and aware of this, and they were, so that's why and now we have an anti-French feeling in this part of Mali, of Niger, and of Chad and Burkina Faso and Senegal, despite despite the collusion between the leader of those countries and the French, particularly the French president. So that is to say, they realize that there is a gap between the leader, African leader, and their population, and that's why they are trying to bridge this gap, and by coming and helping with a new approach.
All in all, critics argue that the recent trips by Western leaders to Africa may be a way to apologize for the wrongs done in the past.